Hi, I'm Suzanne. I am a videographer and photographer, and I am here because this month is International Women's Day on the 8th of March. In keeping with this year's theme of #ChooseToChallenge, I've been working with 9 brilliant women creating a photo series to represent different stereotypes that modern Australian women face. Alongside this photo series, we've recorded a conversation on each of these topics to help create a dialogue around them for International Women's Day. You're going to get one a day until the 9th of March, so stay tuned. Today's topic is #ChooseToChallenge motherhood, and I have this conversation with Claire. Hi, today we are talking about motherhood, and I have to discuss this with me the brilliant...
Hardly brilliant.
Yes, brilliant. Go on, what's your name?
Claire Pisani.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so I'm very proud of being a mother. I'm also proud of having a small business in which I help people to achieve their professional career potential.
So I've asked you here today obviously because you're a mother, and I think you have a really beautiful, I know it was really difficult, but really beautiful path to being a mother to humans and not just my dogs. So maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
I'm the parent of an amazing grown-up young woman who my husband and I adopted when she was a baby, and the pathway to parenthood was very different, but the actual parenting, I presume, is pretty much the same. That's from my point of view. She might disagree.
So then I guess as the topic of this is choose to challenge, what are the assumptions that are made about women being mothers, do you think, that you've experienced and seen?
Look, if we were to wind back the clock maybe 20 years, or more, you would find that people who have work while they parent would be frowned upon.
Mm.
But in fact, more recently, it's actually gone the other way. So people who take time out to just be a parent, you're sort of considered to be not adequately busy, not adequately challenged, and
or unfeminist as a mother if you're not also working. That's what I've heard thrown around.
I haven't thought of it in feminism terms, but I have thought of it. I remember being aware that there's a kind of peer pressure to be more busy than everyone else.
Because you're a mother?
Because you're a mother and because you're working.
Don't take any downtime.
Yeah, and it's not about don't take any downtime. It's that if you're actually not at your exhaustion limits, then there's something wrong with you.
Right.
Okay, so there's a kind of competition to be busier than everyone.
Right.
That's what I noticed. As I said, I think this has been a change. The disapproval is probably there. There's always disapproval somehow.
Yes, yeah. At
part
either
of being
extreme.
at every extreme is always disapproval, and I think that is something that maybe men don't contend with quite as much. Women are always being expected to be a certain way, and if they're not precisely in the very center of that expectation, everyone else's expectation, then somehow there's something wrong with the way they're operating.
Yes.
I think we're in transition.
Yes.
I think we're in transition to a place where being a parent rather than being a mother, and where being a professional parent rather than being split between work and home. I think, especially when kids are very young, I was really privileged not to have to work during that time, and it really benefited our family, in particular my daughter. And I really, really feel it must be very confronting and difficult for women who have newborns and young kids to not just miss out on their time, but the whole process of recalibrating how you think and how you act and how you behave and how you speak to be professional and then to be a mum. They're so different, so difficult for women, and yet they just take it on the chin and make the best of it. I would like to think we're in transition to a place where the parenting does become more equal.
Yeah.
and where the opportunities for women to really focus on their kids when they want to and resume a professional life when they're able to, willing to, want to, ready to, all of that.
Yeah.
I think that's
definitely
where we should be heading. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it normalised more and more for in a heterosexual couple for the man to be the one that stays at home, and I think that it's almost in a way become more of a healthy dynamic because the woman will tend to still pick up a lot of the at-home tasks. So it's not that the man is taking on what was traditionally the wife/mother's role. It's more of an even game then in that situation. From what we see, but obviously some scenarios.
But we're generalising.
Yes.
But there are daily conversations in the media about these topics.
Yeah.
And one of the things that occurred to me is that from not having children, from being a single person, when you partner with someone, your world becomes bigger. This is one of the wonderful things that being a parent brings. What it should bring with it is empathy. Okay, so I think that this is a really important concept because mothers will all feel empathy. They will feel empathy for another child that's fallen over and injured themselves, or like their hearts and their awareness are expanded. It really happens to fathers as well, but not all fathers. So I would like us to transition to a place where just being a parent
means that increase in empathy.
Drives that increase in empathy. So to give you a substantiated example of where I think that isn't the case, where a prime minister has to consult his wife, who says, well, if you can't think about it any other way, at least pretend it's your daughter's.
Yeah,
and then see how, then maybe you will see how it should feel.
Yeah.
And I worry that he already, having had daughters for some significant amount of years, didn't automatically go there.
But not even, I mean, obviously we're talking in the space of parenthood, but I'm not a parent. And the idea to not have empathy on those topics that you're referencing in particular, but just, it's so important that people in leadership have that, and that we should be able to rely on them having that, even more so if they are parents, regardless of their gender.
Yes, so it should be regardless of whether you're a parent, regardless of your gender. Nonetheless, I've given you a fairly sizable demonstration of one that isn't meeting that criterion.
Yes, yeah.
So it's very hard to see how we can change the legal framework, the compliance framework, the requirements for women around working conditions and making it more flexible, when the people who are in a position to make those changes, to legislate those changes, to drive the discussion around the concepts that will eventually lead to legislation, are nowhere near.
They don't really have the empathy of what
they don't
the
have the empathy of what a woman goes through in a most extreme experience. So has to be reminded, think about it like it's your daughter. Okay, so that is a reality check on where women are at the moment.
Yes, and it kind of feeds into as well one of the other topics of this series being leadership, and what Jess spoke about, who was talking about leadership, was how undervalued the emotional intelligence that women bring to leadership is. And I think in that situation, having a female prime minister would have been a very different story.
Where empathy is something that germinates when you have a child. It germinates in your heart when you have a child. Okay, it's really hard to be an unempathetic being if you have a child. The nature of being a mother means that you open your heart and focus your care on someone else, sometimes even to the exclusion of your own well-being. I think motherhood is not about yourself. It's about the other. Okay, and that is something that should be valued so much more. And another aspect of motherhood, I think this is my personal view, okay? This is probably not reflected in society at large at the moment, But if you parent the right way, you're not just a mother for the time being. You're actually someone that's propagating beautiful values into society forever. So you're building the next generation of humans. And just as what you do wrong can last with that next generation of humans for a long time, so what you do right can pave the way for an enormous amount of development and growth in the next generation.
Yeah. And I think that is extremely undervalued in our society.
It's really undervalued.
That's why it's so hard for mothers to find something that resembles a balance in their life, because there isn't value placed on the work that goes into being a mother. And this is why women are in a worse off situation financially, and it's a large part across the board, because in modern Australian society there isn't a value placed on that, because there isn't a monetary value aligned with it. And this is tying it into...
I think it's more than that.
Oh, it's so much more than that.
No, what I mean is, if there was a job description one day that said, here's a job, we want you to come and...
cultural development
and re-engineering.
Yeah.
And education around systemic values over a period of 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds like a very intense professional job.
That sounds like a seriously intense job that would be remunerated massively highly. And by the way, the work that you will do is expected to carry on and develop that organisation's goals for the next 20 or 30 years. Okay. That would be a professional challenge.
And it's not a 9-to-5 job.
And it's not a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
Okay. You'd expect to be remunerated massively, and it would be considered very weighty, very important work, right? But being a mother isn't valued in that way, and it's not often seen through that lens.
Yeah. And the massive achievement that it is.
And the massive achievement that it is.
Yeah.
And the massive guilt trip when you fail. You know, the weight of failure is just beyond a quarterly target that wasn't met.
Yeah. And I understand what you mean by failure, but I don't like using that word in association with mothers, because I'm like, there's no such thing as perfect. It's impossible.
Well, actually, I like to look at it that there's regular failures.
Yeah.
It's how you regroup after the failures.
Yes, yeah.
You know, and that is an important lesson
And
in relationship building.
Children how to deal with failures.
Yeah.
Very important, yeah.
You need to provide the right support and nurture in the context of that failure, okay, around the failure. You need to be able to let that person know that they aren't a failure.
Because of that thing that happened.
Because of the weight.
Yeah.
So I think that's what builds resilience, is being supported through failure to know that it's not terminal.
Yes.
Okay, rather than the failure itself. So I sort of don't fully agree with that. I want to extend the learning from failure really comes from the emotional resilience that you build, and you can only build the emotional resilience if you're supported to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that is probably the biggest thing that you can offer your children.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what, even just as you're talking, then I've realised that I'm totally sitting within the stigma of failure. And you very politely just explained why I was stigmatising it without actually saying it. Yeah, there shouldn't be an issue with the word failure. It's a normal part of life.
Failure is a normal part of life, and nobody likes it, and nor should we. Okay. Empathy dictates that when other people fail, you don't blame or shame, but you have compassion for them. And if you use empathy as a driver, then you're more likely to pick up the nuances around what bits failed and what bits you can still take from the experience that weren't failures.
Yeah. Did you find when you were going back into the workplace that you faced prejudice for having taken time off to be having taken time off work to be a mother?
Yeah, I didn't feel it in the workplace. I felt it, I think I alluded to this earlier, I actually felt it around the parenting, the parents at the school, especially the other mothers, who were working and parenting at the same time.
Right.
I really did feel it.
Right.
You know, that there was this competition to see who was the busiest.
Right.
You know, who'd done the biggest amount of exercise that week and who was exhausted from the classes.
Had the least sleep.
And who got the drunkest. There was real competition about who was working the hardest while parenting.
Right.
Or maybe it was only that small amount, but I certainly felt that.
Yeah.
Because I really was just very focused on my child.
Yeah.
And I really know that that's a privilege. I know that that is not something that we were privileged because my husband earned enough, and between the two of us, we decided that our child could have the benefit of my full-time care until she was about 7.
Yeah.
You know, and it was really worth doing. We felt it. But my career suffered tremendously. I lost my career completely.
Yeah.
So I had to start again afterwards. And I don't know. I think I'm lucky because when I meet with my professional peers who haven't taken time out, who are outrageously senior, you know, at the moment I'm not getting the sense that they think more poorly of me for having done that and lost the seniority that I would have had. But that's based on the fact that I've now been working for 10 years in my own business, and so I can communicate like a professional.
Yes, yeah.
So I think it's more based on how I present now, whereas I still feel the lack of that career for 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I did lose a lot. I lost a lot of money and a lot of career and a lot of self-esteem and a lot of prestige.
Yeah, yeah. So then how do you feel like, I mean, I could give answers on how I think you've challenged this, but how do you feel like you've challenged these issues that women face as mothers?
Well, I'm just lucky because I started my own business and that gave me a feeling of contributing again. I do think that the way forward for women, ideally, if they want that, is that flexibility of career path.
Within the current system, the best way you can challenge and manage it is this flexibility that you talk about in career.
Yeah. So if the corporate world doesn't, at this point, give women unlimited flexibility to parent as they need to, then I think it's a really good thing if women can skew their education and career choices to allow them to develop part-time businesses or part-time work, that when they want to do that, when they have the opportunity, when they parent, they can avail themselves of the flexibility that the system has failed to give them. They can create their own flexibility. Don't know if that's the best way, but it's certainly the way forward at the moment.
Yeah.
And
the system is kind of rigged against
it is
parents at the moment, but also particularly mothers within the expectations that are still placed on women to be the primary parent.
Yes.
I like it, but you hear stories about in a heterosexual couple again, the father being listed as the primary contact on the school form, but the school still calls the mother first, which because of these, I mean,
norms.
Sometimes conscious and sometimes unconscious biases that people have. But I think, I love the point that you make on this flexibility, and I think this is why, the gig economy and side hustles are becoming so much more prevalent.
Yep.
Is for exactly this reason. And I remember before I came to the realization that I probably don't want to grow my own humans, and I was looking at the system of okay, so how do people make this work? I still have not worked out how people make this work. The system as it is at the moment, with school hours and working hours and expectations,
it's very stressful.
It actually doesn't make any sense to me still how people make it fit. It's apple plus fridge equals pool. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And the amount of stress that it generates is utterly unnecessary. Why should mothers, especially mothers, I know fathers do the job sometimes, but especially when kids are young, it'll tend to be a mum, and they'll try and I know mums who took part-time roles, officially 3 days a week, but actually it was 4 days work, but you were paid for 3 days.
Yeah.
But in order to be able to pick up your child from school. And like, you know that this is what the school hours are in Australia. The school hours are fixed. We've known about them for decades and decades.
Yeah.
They've never changed.
Yeah.
How is it that our system doesn't support looking after your kids when they leave school?
Yeah.
How is it that you know, this whole parenting thing is done on the side?
And
know?
it's impossible for a 2-parent household. I can't even imagine for a 1-parent household what that looks like.
I think for a 1-parent household it must be very difficult.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean, not just the financial burden, but the feeling of not having the availability that for your kids that you'd love to have for them. You know, it's really challenging.
Yeah.
You know, so I think the system is just sort of failing us.
Yeah. It's still the system set up for a 2-parent household where one person stays at home
all
full
the time
and
does
that's when it
the
works.
cooking and the shopping and the cleaning and the washing.
And that's the only way that the current system works, which is not the system that most people are living.
But there isn't, I mean, we should add to that commentary. This is Australian life today. In the circle of friends that we have, we've had this discussion over the years that in other countries, especially in Asian countries, it is part of the societal expectations that there will be support workers working inside the family to look after the kids. And so what's interesting about that, though, is that the parents are less involved with their kids. And I don't know, I also see that as a fail. You know, on the one hand, it's really great. You don't have the rushing and the, you know, I mean, there's a lot of rushing when my daughter was little. There was a lot of rushing.
Yeah.
And some of it was such a waste of time. I don't know. I set myself this impossible agenda that we had to do music and we had to do sport and we had to do language and
because that's what you told to be the perfect mum. You have to do all these things.
Well, I didn't think about it as what people expected of me. I thought about it as, what does my daughter need?
Yeah.
She needs this list.
Yeah, everything,
Okay.
everything, the whole world.
Okay, and I've got this.
Yeah.
Oh, damn, I haven't done that one.
Which, of course, you want her to have everything.
You do.
But it becomes your responsibility and everything is impossible.
Taxi. Yes, a lot of taxiing.
Yes.
But look, also, if you talk to all the parents and all the teachers will always tell you, these kids, these younger kids, they have activities every single day after school. You know, is that bad? Is it good? What happened to the days where kids would play with each other locally in their area after school?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a generational change. I wouldn't comment on what's working better.
Yeah, and I guess that's where we're seeing women challenge it at the moment, is that the incredible number of, as we're commonly referring them to, lady startups, which are the side hustles, which are women starting their own businesses. That's how women are filling the gaps. That's how because the system at a higher level, which would be much easier, is not changing it at the base level where women have that control.
Yeah.
But it also, I mean, what we've seen happen that is awful for that has had a terrible impact on women is when an extreme situation like COVID occurs, all of these businesses become destabilised.
So that, of course, they're the first to suffer. And it actually has been, you know, in so many ways that are measurable, it has been a very debilitating experience for women rather than people. On
so many fronts. Like
on so many
domestic
fronts.
violence, on the increase of household labour, on teaching children from home, on so many, and on businesses as we're
and on businesses that have collapsed, and on the fact that the people who lost their jobs in retail and hospitality and in tourism, their feminine areas of work. Women have chosen those professions for whatever reason.
We're overrepresented in the areas.
Overrepresented in that area. Therefore, it was a recession that really has impacted women. And now that the recession's over, the impact is still there for women. You know, I have to reorganize, recalibrate my business to make adjustments for the changes that occurred during COVID.
Which is incredibly stressful. But you know
challenging.
What? You'll do it brilliantly because you're a woman and a mother and you've always had to make it work. Like, you think how much better you're going to respond to this than perhaps a male counterpart would have because of the expectations on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
I'll do my best. And that's a mantra. I'll do my best.
Yes.
You know, that's a mother's mantra.
Yes.
So I think that the way forward for society ought to be more tolerant, to be more understanding. So, because at the moment, anything that's around parenthood is not valued really at all. It's considered to be, people are still surreptitiously asked whether they're going to be having a child in the next period of time in jobs.
Yeah, you're unfulfilled if you don't have a child, is the societal leaning. Yeah. But then there's also, if you do, there's actually no value in that.
It is not valued to have children.
I keep raising these points, come up a lot in this series, but the next generation, even for me, makes me so hopeful. Makes me so hopeful. We have a lot of really impressive women in your generation who are challenging the issues for motherhood, including yourself. And hopefully the system changes so it's not having to happen at a granular level sooner rather than later.
Hope so. There are a lot of amazing young women who are articulate and speaking up now about experiences that they've had, and they have their bravery and courage and intelligence has got potential, I think, to make bigger changes than the women of my generation. It's very slow progress.
Yes, but it's progress.
Yeah.
As slow as it is, it's progress.
It is.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to me. I really, really appreciate your time and your perspective on all of this.
It's my huge pleasure.
Thanks.